pictures of the plaque that went to Africa?
Not with me. Everybody's on mute, including me.
You need to be
Or maybe
bragging
not
on
me.
that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Right now, I'm just trying to run the meeting. I'm going to mute. Go to mute too, Wendy. Thank you.
Doesn't sound like you're going to mute.
Opening up, but first thing I'd like to say is congratulations to our own Joe Gaither. We are pleased to learn that club member Joe Gaither is the subject of a new book that is available on Amazon. And here's a picture of the book here. And so I encourage you guys to get on there and get that for and support our membership. Congratulations, Joe. Also, I want to make the announcement. I want to congratulate our member, Tara Marciniak. Tara was recently appointed as president and general manager of Center in the Square, effectively July 1st, 2022. So let's give Tara a round of applause. I don't know how many of you guys saw our newsletter, but that just came out. But Reef, Gene does such a good job on that. But Reef and Jenny wanted to address the club, and so I'd like to read that. As all of you are probably aware, the COVID issue is not yet history. New variants are active and are easily transmissible, if perhaps less virulent. Additional new variants are likely to appear in the future. Recent statistics has indicated that Roanoke area is once again in the high risk category with respect to the community spread. Each club member should continue to assess their individual risk and make decisions about what measures they choose for prevention of becoming infected, mask wearing, avoidance of crowds, social distancing, and so forth. In the spirit and respect for others, we have a variety of mature members, some persons with higher risk factors, etc. We ask that if you have symptoms suggesting COVID infection, have concerns about having recently been in a situation of high risk exposure, or in an early recovery phase, or etc., that you elect to attend Zoom meetings and not appear at chapter hall lunches or other Kiwanis gatherings. Thank you for your thoughtful cooperation, Reef Kessler and Jenny Lee. So thank you for letting me share that with you. And we have some cards to pass around. I don't know if you've heard, but past President Reggie Wood had suffered a stroke. And so we have, John's going to pass away cards. And our member Jill Sluss, his husband, is going through a hard time, has to have surgery out of town. So this sent a card for that family as well. Thank you. And that's our invocation today. Is going to be led by Dave Spangler.
As I pray, give our invocation, please join me in your faith as I pray in my faith. Lord, thank you for this day. As Kiwanians, thank you that we can be of service and a blessing to our community. Thank you for the relationships and friendships we have developed with club members. Thank you for the meal that Amy and her crew prepared for us for our nutritional strength, and give us the spiritual strength to do good with and for others. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
I'm Gary Dirk, the song leader, and we're going to do a little something different today. We always like to have a song that's appropriate for our speaker, and I have one picked out, but I want to tell you that Ralph Berrier, I've been a fan of his for a long time with the Roanoke Times articles, and he wrote a book, If Trouble Don't Kill Me. And it's about his great grandfather and his great uncle. And in that book, it's all about kind of country music and all. It explains in 1940 on the radio, the top three performers was Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys. Number two was Roy Rogers and the Sons of the Pioneers. And number three was Roy Hall and the Blue Ridge Entertainers right here in Roanoke on WDBJ. And his grandfather and uncle, Clayton Hall and Sayford Hall, played in there. They also performed on the Grand Ole Opry. Isn't that something? So give Ralph a hand. And following that tradition, Ralph plays in a great group called the Java Brothers Bluegrass Band. And he plays a pretty good fiddle too. So I'm just going to read you the lyrics in this song. I thought it was very appropriate for newspaper, and I've been having trouble with my computer, so I couldn't do something fancy with getting Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs up here on the video. So the name of it is Jimmy Brown, the newsboy. I sell the morning paper, sir. My name is Jimmy Brown. Everyone knows that I'm the newsboy of the town. You'll hear me yelling, Roanoke Times, as I run along the street. I have no hat upon my head, no shoes upon my feet. Never mind, sir, how I look. Don't look at me and frown. I sell the morning paper, sir. My name is Jimmy Brown. My mother always tells me, sir, there's nothing in the world to lose. I'll get a place in heaven, sir, to sell the gospel news. So we're glad to have you, Ralph.
Thank you, Gary. Our Pledge of Allegiance today is going to be led by Amy Carter. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Our introduction of guests today is going to be Ben Burks. Good to see you, Ben. I'll take that sheet when you're done.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. If the guests and their hosts would stand, that would be great. And Doug, you can stand too, since you're with me. Keely Lancaster is with Serve Pro, and I think she's with Clark. Keely, excellent. Karen Carney is with BRILC. Excellent, and she's with Mike Loveman. Also with Mike is Mark Davis. Mark, Karen, good to have you all. Lauren Zion is with Ken Briggs. Lauren, good to have you, Ken. And Doug Pacor, retired United Methodist minister, recently retired, is my guest, and kind of Ken's too. So let's give them a warm welcome. Yes, indeed. Thank you. And I'll get that to you, John.
All right. I wanted to bring Mr. Briggs up for our recognition of service leadership program advisors.
Thank you, President Clark. I'm filling in today for past President Mike McAvoy, who's on vacation. Mike is chairman of our service leadership programs. And for the benefit of the guests, most of us, our members know that we are one Kiwanis club, but we also sponsor service leadership programs that passes on the idea of community service, perhaps to the next generation. Today, we invited our builders clubs and key club advisors to be here with us. Most of them are teachers. And for some strange reason, they're pretty busy this time of the year. In Roanoke County, the teachers go back next Wednesday, August 3rd. Can you believe that? And the students come on August 11th. But we do have one teacher here today, Lauren Zion. Lauren, if you would stand again. Lauren is the Key Club advisor at Northside High School. Lauren graduated from Cave Spring in the year 2017. I asked her that. And in the meantime, she graduated from Longwood University and quickly came back to the Roanoke Valley to help educate our young folks. Lauren, thank you for what you do at the school, and thank you for leading our Key Club. Lauren. The other two guests at my table are Karen Mikowski and Mark Davis. Karen, if you and Mark would please stand. Mike Loveman and I are involved very much in the Action Club. Action Club is a group, as our members know, a service club made up of folks who are living with disabilities. And most of our members have been brain injured. Tomorrow morning, we go to Feeding America. We'll be there at 9 o'clock and work for 3 hours, packaging foods and so on. But the club was chartered about 12 years ago, and the original founders, I think, sort of ran out of gas and ran out of energy. And it looked like it was going to be the end of our action club. But Blue Ridge Independent Living Center, headed by Karen, the executive director, and Mark Davis, the community service director, stepped up and have kept our action club going. Karen's a very busy person. She's involved with independent living centers throughout the state. Mark finds 3 hours every other Monday to host our club. He is a mental health counselor. He just has a magnetic way of communicating with our Action Club members and engaging them and getting discussions going on current events, et cetera. We have a great time, and we would not exist without the Blue Ridge Independent Living Center. Join me in recognizing Karen and Mark. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now we get the pleasure of hearing an autobiography from one of our members here. I'm going to invite Joe Bradney up.
Thank you, Clark. And thank you for saying it's going to be a pleasure, because I'm not sure of that. I figured out I've got 6 minutes to talk, 74 years to cover. So that's roughly what, 5 seconds a year. So I'm going to be talking until, John cues the music and Clark is one of those. And I haven't written anything down, so I'm winging it. There's about 6 chapters in my life. So we're going to start with chapter 1. Hope we get through it. I was born in 1948. Right after World War II. So the different times that our country has been through, we'll start from that point. You'll understand the perspective of people my age. I was born in a hospital where my mother had gone to nursing school and became an RN in 1933. 1948, I'm born in that hospital. Grew up in a small town in New Jersey next to Fort Dix. We were right on the edge of the Pine Barrens. And we were so small, I heard that our town limit signs were back to back. And I had 4 good friends, and we were always together, no matter what was going on in your life, no matter where you were, go outside, and those guys were always there. We were always there for each other, and it's a great way to grow up. We were playing in the woods, swimming, fishing, camping. I had a shotgun from the time I was 10. And to have those guys at your back, riding bicycles, doing everything stupid we could think of. And I remember the times we would get into any kind of trouble. It always seemed to be that all of us would be seated around our dining room table. My dad was at the head of the table holding court, and all their fathers were standing around the back. And we all got our story straight. If we had damaged anything, we would always admit it and try to make up for it, but get the story straight, so that we didn't look as bad as it was. And Dad always knew the weak point. He'd look around the room, and then he would go to Denny. And he would point and say, "What happened?" And Denny would spill the beans. Completely off script. And whatever happened, happened. But going through high school is when the world changed. I was 15 years old, and most of the people in this room remember where they were and how they heard that President Kennedy had been shot, and where they were and how they heard that shot had been fatal. The world would never be the same. It still isn't. So I went through high school and college in the 60s. Going into college, we had to deal with the draft because Vietnam was erupting. And the first year was a student deferment. Second year, I think we had to take some kind of test. The third year, there was something else that we had to cover. And the fourth year, we were just 1A. We were on our own. But going in, I had taken a competitive scholarship for the state to get an NROTC scholarship. There aren't very many colleges that offer the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps. One of them was the University of Pennsylvania. So I was accepted at the University of Pennsylvania, And I placed number 2 in the of the 800 students in the state who had taken that exam. So I was one of the 2 who was going to be selected for a full scholarship at an Ivy League university, plus a paycheck, and and in exchange for 6 years, in the Navy. And then I took the physical, and I had not had my glasses changed from the time I was 10 years old. So I failed the eye test because it said it was not, my eyesight was not correctable to 20/20. Could have fooled me. I never really used my glasses much, but that killed it. So I was counseled out by a young lieutenant, like there's any other. And he told me that they would keep a slot open for me in the Naval Officers Candidate School once I got out of college. I said, great, thanks a lot. I'll have to get scholarship someplace else. So I attended Lehigh University and graduated in 1970. And that offer of the open slot in the Naval Officers Candidate School came in very handy because we were still in the draft and they had just come out with a lottery. So a little bit later, I started my job in New York, after completing NOCS with a CPA firm, one of the big 8, which are now the big 4. And it's a great world to deal with, working in Manhattan with Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 clients and hobnobbing. I remember there was one job that a partner had called me in to do a businessman's review of a client that was being acquired by one of our large clients. It was a company called Halston. Now, some of the women know, Halston as a designer. He had been a young milliner at Lord and Taylor until Jackie Onassis, or Kennedy at the time, discovered his hats. Once she bought one of his hats, that was it. The rest of the carriage trade was coming to Halston. And he was one of the top designers in New York. I'd never heard of the guy. So I had to spend time with him, going out to lunch every day and trying to pick his brain to see if there were any outstanding licenses that he hadn't disclosed and any other liabilities that the company might be picking up that they didn't know about. And never, we were always in these little dark, intimate little restaurants in Midtown that I didn't know he was gay. But there I am, sitting in these little dark romantic restaurants with Roy Halston Frowick. And after 5 years in Manhattan, I'd already become a CPA, and our firm handed out new business cards to add certified public accountant under your name. And I was thrilled. I got the business cards. I was handing them out to everybody I knew from within the top financial range in Manhattan. And I'd handed out about 100 cards when I got a call from the treasurer of one of our clients, and he was chuckling a little bit, and he said, oh, congratulations. He said, did you look at this business card? I said, yes, certified public accountant. He said, look at it again. So I looked at the card, and the printer had dropped off the L in public. So I'd handed out 100 business cards that said certified pubic accountant before I got them reprinted. And the same client that I was doing that acquisition of Halston, we did have there was a press release, and I was tagged to go and escort one of the celebrities who was attending that, and that was Liza Minnelli. So here I am, 25 years old, in a custom tailored tux that cost me most of my paycheck, with Liza Minnelli. And, I was just agog at all these celebrities. And I walked out, and she was, to her credit, she is incredibly charming, very accommodating. And, when I tie a bow tie, even today, it always comes a little bit this way. I have to keep straightening it, and then it'll turn sideways. I keep straightening it. She retied my tie for me. And I thought that was sweet. After 5 years in New York, the pace kind of gets to you a little bit. And I was wondering, if my social life could have been a little better than working, studying, reading, and handling other commitments. I put an ad in a professional journal. There was no longer, I had a 4-year commitment with the Navy. I no longer had any ties with that in the reserves. And so I was ready to leave. I asked the firm to transfer me. We had offices all over the world. And I kept saying there were no openings anyplace. So I finally put an ad in the professional journal and got an offer from a young CPA firm in Guam who were taking one of the big 8 head to head. They had formerly been with Pete Marwick. They brought in one guy from our Denver office of Haskins and Sells, and I came out there to be their audit manager. And he didn't do this. It just says, wrap up, please. So I spent 11 years in Guam, which was a great experience. My wife is Guamanian. I met her there the second week I was on the island. We have 4 wonderful children, 8 grandchildren, and I feel blessed. And now that we have moved to Roanoke, I am in the Kiwanis Club, so I'm twice blessed. And I will wrap it up from here.
Thank you, Jeff.
You can buy the book later. Thank you.
We have a few announcements today. Jean Bollendorf's going to do our birthdays for us.
Good afternoon, Kiwanians. Nice to see all of you. I think we have a few of August's birthday recipients in the room, and I hope we have 1 or 2 on Zoom. Mike Obrakta is August 3rd, so he won't be joining us in person for a little while yet. Mai Chung is August the 4th. Amy Carter is August the 6th. Cynthia Gray, August the 9th. Alex Barge, who's here today, is August the 11th. Also on August the 11th is Guy Bird. I think he's back here. Lance Bowen is August the 12th. Harry Zuloff is also August the 12th. He's here today. Diane Chitwood is August the 14th. John Pendleton is August the 19th. Is John with us today? No, on Zoom. Awesome. Don Chichester is August the 23rd, and Don is going to have his 89th birthday this year. So that is a major accomplishment. And Alex Bowman is August the 29th. Ben Spiker, could I prevail upon your golden pipes to lead us in the birthday song? Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kiwanians. Happy birthday to you.
So our next 2 announcements are going to be from the Zoom stage. Sherry Hartman had an upcoming nature park activities.
Thanks so much, President Clark. Can you hear me okay? Are we working? All right. Thumbs up. Can we hear? All right. On August 27th,
I guess if you're on Zoom, you can hear Sherry, but not in the room.
all right. Well, on August 27th, we will have a cleanup. We're imploring anybody who can help with that
Yeah, that's
at
if you could
Horton's Creek
summarize, John. I appreciate it. Thank you.
at 10 o'clock. And I think John Montgomery is going to take it from here.
Since I'm not, maybe I can just share with the room. She's telling the group that the next Nature Park Committee meeting is going to be Monday, August 8th at 4 p.m. There's going to be some plans shared, I believe. Don,
You
right?
can't hear John if you're on Zoom, right?
You're on the committee, please.
So let me just tell you, besides August 27th, that Saturday needing your help, our next committee meeting is August 8th at Melrose Library, and we're actually going to reveal a rendering of the Kiwanis Nature Park. You're welcome
Thank
to
you.
come to that at Melrose
I
Library.
know we're going to try it again with Betsy Bohannon with support back to school backpacks.
Okay,
Did you want to summarize for Betsy as well? Okay, I
I'm
appreciate
here.
it, John.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
Betsy's hopefully reminding the Zoomers that we're getting down to
Betsy, they can't hear us, so you can go ahead and make the announcement for those of us on Zoom.
Okay, but because I need your money, if you have not donated to the CHIP backpack program, that's a child health investment partnership. We need at least 16 more people with $40 to pay for these backpacks. And I've already told Autumn that she has to cut out some of this because we just can't afford this. But if you have not donated any money, please put a message to me on here and tell me that you will help donate, because we do not have enough money yet to pay for these items. And we need at least 16 more, and they're about $40 a piece.
Thank you. And Joyce is going to talk to us about Ducky Derby.
That's it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Betsy.
Thank you, Clark. Joyce Montgomery here with Ducky Derby. You've seen me selling the tickets as you come in. This is for our district convention, which is in August, and we have the raffle drawing there. There are 15 drawings, so it's a good chance. We've had several Roanoke people win these prizes. John and I will be there. So if anybody wins it, we will bring it back to you. So that's even a better plus. You don't have to hunt it down. The money goes to the district foundation, and what they do with it is they divide it among 11 of the districts that have neonatal units in their hospitals, and they give each one $3,000. So we are already winners no matter what, because $3,000 of this money will come back to the Roanoke Carilion Clinic neonatal unit. So, you know, it's a win-win here. Also, I will be selling tickets for the next 2 weeks here. Those on Zoom land, if you would like to donate, then if you could either put it in the chat box for John or email him, and we can bill it to your account as well. So there's a chance for everyone to participate. The other thing we have is at the convention, we always take these gift baskets that each club donates to the convention, which is another raffle that happens at the convention. So we're looking for someone who could make us a big basket that we could take to the convention to have raffled off. The club does have some money to help with that. So if anybody's interested, would they please contact me or John or somebody? And you can go online and look at all kinds of ideas for baskets and that kind of thing. So we would love to find someone who's willing to help us get a basket so we can take it to the convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Last announcement is we are doing our bocce ball tournament. It's going to be September 17th. I left the flyer on all the tables. We have met as a committee. We've decided we're going to do this as a morning event. That way everybody can come have fun and then get on with the rest of their day. So a morning event, instead of lunches, we're going to do a breakfast. We're going to have biscuits available for everybody. Amy Bailey is doing homemade Bloody Mary mix. So we're going to have Bloody Marys, biscuits, and I can't leave out the mimosas for the ladies. So we'll have mimosas as well. Pretty excited about it. Should be a lot of fun. If you want to sign up as a team, please email me. Again, we're trying to make this as a fun event and just trying to cover our cost for the event. I'm not trying to raise money on this event. So, but the cost is $75 a team. And if you guys could just hit me with an email with how many teams you'd like, and we'll get started. Thank you so much. I do have one brag buck today. Steve McGraw had one.
Thanks, President Clark. First brag is on Amy Clark and her team who put together such a wonderful meal Wednesday night. And I'm so glad that some of you didn't come because we got to take home a lot of extra shrimp and eat it through the weekend. So you might want to show up the next time. The other brag is on Coach Joe Gaither, the subject of this book. Ordered mine as soon as John sent out the message, and I got it on Monday. And Joe just autographed mine, so I would recommend you do the same. Joe, it's quite a life you've had. Thank you so much for being a member of this club. And that's Amy Carter, not Amy Clark, excuse me.
And I did forget to make that announcement. Our Interclub Wednesday, when we first opened, was an absolute success. Lee and Amy did a fantastic job on the food. So thank you all again for that. Our guest today, our speaker, is going to be introduced by John Montgomery.
Thank you, President Clark. David Bowers always volunteers to coordinate the programs in July. And I understand, according to Mike Obrachta and others, that that's because that's the meeting we have the least number of programs. So he gets credit for putting together a month of speakers without as much effort as other months. And I'm kidding, because David's done it every year I've been in the club, and that's a long time. And so when he had 2 programs, he went for the 2 best he could find. I think we enjoyed the Bagpiper 2 weeks ago, and today we have Ralph Barrier Jr. Because David couldn't be here today, he asked if I would be willing to substitute for him, and I jumped in readily because I know Ralph personally. Many of you are familiar with Ralph's work, and Gary Durk touched on some of his talents in his song today. And I can tell you that Ralph has more than 30 years experience as a journalist. Coincidentally, I have worked a long time in the field of journalism as well. We never actually worked full time at the same company, even though I'm retired now and Ralph's, I guess, several years shy of that. We never were employed by the same employer at the same time, but we do share a number of friends. And I can tell you that Ralph's pretty talented at socializing as well. He has an ability, I think, to tell a story. He's done that in the sports field. He's done it in features. He's done a column for a long time. Many of you are familiar with Dad Line, which is a clever play. Did you come up with the title of that yourself? I think we had a committee. So Ralph is an expert on the Roanoke Times detail, and I'm sure he's going to share some of that of you. He's also a talented musician, as Gary talked. I don't know if you're planning to sing or play today or not, but if he runs short of remarks, he can do that. I can also tell you he's very bright. I enjoy crediting him for going further in Jeopardy competition than I did when we entered it at the same time a few years back ago. And that's not the only place I've valued his intelligence. He has a way of understating in his writing, in his talking, in his music, I think. And to me, that's the kind of guy you want to be friends with, someone who has more talent than they proclaim. And so you're constantly raising your eyebrows with, wow, I didn't know that. Look forward to learning a few things perhaps yourself today that you didn't know. Please welcome journalist Ralph Barrier.
Thank you, John. I think we're both still waiting for that call from Ken Jennings any day now. So I would like to thank the Kiwanians of Roanoke for inviting me here today to be part of this program. And I am Ralph Barrier. I spent 32 years as a full-time newspaper reporter, with most of that career being at the Roanoke Times. And I want to say here at the outset, in the interest of full disclosure, full journalistic disclosure, a couple of days ago at a dinner party, I later learned that one of the guests there tested positive for COVID. So in the best interest of everyone here, I've been wearing a mask, and I just wanted everybody to know that. And like my dad's hunting dogs, I'm up on all my shots, been boosted, even had COVID in January. So, I feel like I'm Iron Man now with all the antibodies I have. So, but as John mentioned, I did have the privilege of working at the Roanoke Times in the news, the features, and the sports departments at the newspaper. I got the full newsroom tour. There was not a department that wanted to keep me there. They just kept running me out of all of them. So, and I've even written and co-authored a couple of nonfiction books. I left full-time newspaper work last year, and it was my decision to leave, unlike a lot of my former colleagues in recent years whose jobs were taken away by these shifting out-of-state corporations that have operated the newspaper over the last decade. And I still freelance for a variety of outlets, which include the Roanoke Times, where I still occasionally write the parenting column that John mentioned, the dad line, and there's a copy of it you see up there. I'm often doing a lot of hard-hitting investigative pieces like, how old is too old to trick or treat? It's a big question on the minds of a lot of people out there in Roanoke today. But I'm just going to talk briefly today about the changes that I observed during my newspaper career, which sadly have been dominated more recently by the gradual and eventually rapid diminishment of newspapers, reduction in staffing and coverage of the region, and here locally, the shutting down of the section where I spent most of my time, the extra section, that's where the funnies were and where the TV column was every day. And also culminating with the closing of the Roanoke Times Press in 2017, and the eventual sale of the iconic downtown newspaper headquarters to the Roanoke City school system last year. But that's the bad news, as they say in the biz. And some of the more heartening news is some hopeful changes are occurring. And some of them you might already know about because some friends of mine have been guests at your previous meetings and have talked about these changes. Most notably, there's been a rise in online reader-funded news websites in Roanoke, which I'm hoping you have had a chance to read by now. The Cardinal News is one, and the Roanoke Rambler is the other. The Cardinal News was started by a couple of friends of mine, Lou Ann Rife and Dwayne Yancey, who I believe spoke here at a recent meeting. The Roanoke Rambler, started by Henry Gendreau. They're former colleagues and very good friends of mine. And they're legitimate news gathering sites. And not surprisingly, they were founded by former staffers of the Roanoke Times, which the Valley is awash in former staffers of the Roanoke Times. Some who left willingly, some against their will or not of their own volition, but some who still have the news bug in them. Now you combine what they're doing with what's left of the newspaper and its staff, which still includes very good journalists, just not as many as there used to be, and they're just very good reporters and editors and still some of my best friends. You combine with what the newspaper is still doing, even in the state it's in, and along with these news sites, and you see that there is some decent coverage, maybe not as robust as it used to be, but some decent coverage of Western Virginia at a time when many communities across the United States have lost their daily news watchdogs. And in the interest of full journalistic disclosure, I want to say that I still currently freelance, as I said, for the Roanoke Times, but also for the Cardinal News. Now, back when I started in newspapers in the Paleozoic era of the 1980s, and that's me up there on the right in the window. That's how long ago it was when I started. Every town, city, county, village, wide spot in the road had a newspaper. Might have been a weekly newspaper, might have been twice a week, might have been daily. But if you wanted to work at a newspaper, they had jobs. You didn't even have to be a reporter. All these places had opportunities for people to get jobs. I'm going to go off on a tangent here to tell you a little bit about how I got started in newspapers. I worked with a lot of great journalists who came from some of the finest journalistic schools out there, who'd gone to Northwestern, Missouri, and had, you know, they'd made it their lifetime goal, even as a young person, to work in journalism. I did not major in journalism. I didn't take journalism classes. I majored in radio and television, and I wanted to work behind the scenes. But after graduating from college and working briefly part-time at a local TV station and being reduced to having to eat the free happy hour food at McAdoo's downtown, I thought I'd better come up with another plan. So I boomeranged home. I think I invented the gap year. Have you heard young people talk about the gap year where they take a year off to sort of find themselves? I think I invented that. If only I'd just copyrighted it, maybe I would have had a gap career, you know, where I never would have had to work. But I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I did know that I'd like to write. I'd learned that about myself in college when I went to Radford University. And the fall after I graduated and had quit my first job that summer, I was hanging out. This is going to be a recurring theme. I was hanging out with some friends at a bar in Radford, and I saw a buddy of mine who I knew standing over there, and I went to say hello to him. And that guy happened to be talking to this other fellow named Marty, who I knew a little bit, but not very well. Well, Marty had just become the editor of the News Journal in Radford. That was the local paper in Radford, you know, little town, 16, 17,000. Newspaper came out 5 days a week. So pretty good, robust news tradition down there. But Marty had just, he'd just become the editor only a few weeks before. And he got the job because he had started as a part-time sports writer at the News Journal, and then everybody above him quit. And my understanding was most of them quit during one fateful phone call to the publisher who was in Christiansburg. It was literally like, hey, this is Curtis. I quit. Hold on, here's Steve. And then he hands the phone. So, hi, this is Steve. I quit. And finally, everybody quit. And the only person left standing was the part-time sports guy, Marty, who they said, well, let's just make him the editor. So that's the story of Marty, the guy who would eventually hire me as a newspaper reporter. So Marty was at the bar that night, and I walked up to him, and he said he knew that I'd played baseball at Radford and was into sports a little bit. And he said, "You're not doing anything these days?" I said, "Nope." He said, "You want to be the sports editor at the News Journal?" And I said, "Yep." 32 years later, I walked away from the newspaper career. And that story there is just one example of why I never get invited to speak at career day at any of the local schools. You know, like, tell us, Mr. Barrier, how did you get your job? What can you share with the young people? I just hang out in bars till somebody shows up and hires you. So, but that newspaper where I started, at the time, it had a 9-person staff. And that was down from what it had been a couple of years earlier when they combined operations with the sister publication in Christiansburg. And they'd closed their press, which was a harbinger years down the road of some things to come. That paper today, it doesn't come out 5 days a week. It might come out one day a week, a couple, I'm not sure. And it has a staff of maybe one. And that might be a reporter who works out of town and doesn't even have an office there. And this happened in varying degrees everywhere, including the Roanoke Times, where I spent the bulk of my career. When I started, about 400 people worked in that building at 201 West Campbell Avenue, which had been the paper's home address since 1914. And let me just step away from the paper's journalistic importance and traditions and talk about that number of people. Consider the paper's economic importance and significance to downtown Roanoke. There were 400 people in that building every day who needed lunch, who needed to go out and get a cup of coffee in the afternoon to get them through the night shift, who needed to do banking, who needed to go to post-work happy hours for drinks. And boy, did we need that post-work happy hours for drinks a lot of days in the business. And those people are all gone now. That's why I was happy to see that the schools will be moving their offices there, because it will bring a little more life to that spot in downtown where there used to be a lot of activity. And I'm also heartened that at the very least, they were able to take the staff that still works for the Roanoke Times and keep them downtown. So even though the building has been sold to the city schools, the newspaper staff moved into what locally we know as the old post office, the Commonwealth building, just a couple of blocks away near the plaza. and the staff will work out of there. I don't even think they have a sign up yet. They're supposed to get one. But you know, there used to be more than 100 people in news alone on the 3rd floor of that building, from reporters, photographers, editors, copy editors, section designers, graphic artists, assistants, editorial assistants. You know, and now there's not even 100 people in the whole operation, all departments combined. So I just want to talk real quick about what happened to newspapers starting, especially in the 2000s. This is going to be quick and it's going to be oversimplified, but hopefully the essence of it rings true. The common story is going to be told. It's being told now, but it will be told this way and in the future, that the internet killed newspapers. There is truth in that, obviously, but there's a lot more to it. The internet actually brought tremendous opportunity to newspapers to grow audiences and to try things with digital media and videos and expanded ways to tell stories. We won all sorts of national awards for digital things we did in the 2000s on Roanoke.com. We wallpapered the newsroom with awards and with articles from trade journals that would say things like 10 papers who do it right and those kind of things. And so it was, a lot of people thought the internet was going to provide great opportunity because you're going to be able to grow your audience. You didn't have to just sell here in Southwest Virginia. You could sell all over the world. But newspapers, especially locally, they never solved and they never truly addressed the fundamental question: how are we going to make money on the internet? How do we make money, especially when we're giving the news away for free? Now, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, when the internet was still shiny, new, and exciting, and not the social media cesspool we know and love today, newspaper executives believed that when our massive readership of the print product gravitated online, the advertisers would naturally follow. The first part of that actually happened. Roanoke.com, even to this day, has a huge readership. But the second part of that equation didn't happen. The advertisers didn't follow. Because when you push people online, as newspapers did, there eventually became a million other places they could go to look for their news, for their ball scores, for their weather. And advertisers turned out to be the same way. I want you to think about this. In the year 2006, Roanoke.com, the newspaper website, was already 10 years old, fairly mature, still young in internet years, but a lot had happened. It had been around a while, full decade. And we were way ahead of the game when it came to digital news and exciting online presentation, as I've told you with some of the awards and commendations we got. But in 2006, nobody had heard of Facebook. YouTube was invented that year. And the places where people could go for their news just exploded. And not only that, places where advertisers could spend their money. If I'm going to go online, why do I need to advertise on your newspaper website when I can buy a Facebook ad? I can buy a YouTube ad. I can buy a Google ad. Why don't I just start a Facebook page and pay nobody anything? I can start a website. And so the advertising model was not and did not work for newspapers. Then there was a perfect storm between 2007 and 2009 that you saw an increase in the availability of high-speed internet, Wi-Fi in people's homes. Didn't have dial-up as much. Reading the newspaper in the dial-up way was not a lot of fun in the early 2000s. Might as well just read the print edition. It's taking too long to upload this story here. People started to get Wi-Fi. The smartphone was invented, and then the Great Recession occurred 2008, 2009. The newspaper business never really recovered from that era. Even up until about 2007 or so, we in the news business, and I'm speaking personally here, still thought we were going to be okay. The bosses are going to figure out this internet thing. They're not going to let the industry die. They're in the business of making money. They're going to figure it out. It didn't happen. And then the recession happened, and recessions are really bad for newspapers who rely on advertising for most of their revenue. So what happened then was a lot of small companies that had owned newspapers for a long time, like Landmark Communications, which owned the Roanoke Times, which was not a small company, but they basically were a regional company. Landmark was based in Norfolk. They owned the Norfolk paper, the Roanoke Times, and the Greensboro News and Record. And they owned a bunch of community publications. So it was a tight, neat little regional newspaper outfit that had been family owned for a long time. But a lot of those smaller companies at that point said, you know, we're a little bit spooked by this internet thing and we're not sure what's going to happen. I think it's time for us to get out. That opened the door for huge companies to come in and scoop up newspapers, sometimes 1 and 2 at a time, and eventually by the dozens, just to run them and take the money. This is Frank Batten Sr. I mentioned Landmark Communications. They took over, they bought the Roanoke Times in 1969. Frank Batten Sr. was the president of Landmark. He had been a newspaper guy. He'd come up in the family business. When he became a publisher himself in the Norfolk area, his newspaper in the 50s, it is said, was the only one in the Commonwealth to back integration and desegregation in society and in the schools. And in 1969, Landmark bought the Roanoke Times, which had previously been owned by the Fishburne family. And in 1982, Mr. Batten got a crazy idea that people said would never work, and he was going to threaten his company's future. He came up with this little cable outfit called the Weather Channel. And people said, nobody wants to watch the weather 24 hours a day or learn about that. And so, so that's Frank Batten Sr. This is Frank Batten Jr. He did not start the Weather Channel. He was not such a great steward of his father's newspapers, but he was interested in selling off the company that his father had basically built piece by piece. Weather Channel for $3.5 billion. Frank Sr. was actually still alive then, but Frank Jr. was kind of running the show then. Then eventually the newspapers. The Roanoke Times, the Greensboro paper, some of the community papers, kept the Norfolk paper, the Virginia Pilot, until selling it to Tribune, which has now been gobbled up by another firm called Alden. And you wonder, why would these big companies come in and buy these papers? Well, the newspapers were cash machines. They were ATMs. Think about it. They're very old. They're old businesses. Every newspaper likes to say, we've been around since 1847 or 1786 or 100 years or something. Had valuable downtown property. When the Roanoke Times moved to the spot on Campbell Avenue in 1914, Roanoke was barely a generation removed from having been a marsh. That's how old the newspaper was. So the newspapers had profit margins that were in the 20% range. That meant 20% of all the money came in was left over. And even as things started to go bad, profit margins remained high in the double digits because, and it wasn't because of growth, it was because of cuts. But there was a lot to cut. Newspapers were big. They had a lot of employees. They had a lot of staff. So it was easy to cut and reduce and keep those profit margins high. And that's when you first started to see, if you probably remember locally, seeing things reduced at the Roanoke Times. And that kept the profit margin high for the companies. And eventually, Frank Batten Jr. sold the Roanoke Times to Warren Buffett's company. And I literally almost cried tears of joy when it was announced that Warren Buffett had brought the Roanoke Times, because the last 5 years under Landmark had not been great. And I thought, finally, somebody who loves us and a billionaire who loves newspapers. He was a paper boy, just like the song Jimmy Brown, Warren Buffett, the newsboy, and we didn't know the catastrophe that still loomed ahead, because basically the old problems had not been solved. How are you going to increase revenue? You can keep cutting, but eventually you'll start cutting into the muscle and the veins and the arteries and the bones. And that's where we are today. But sometimes the people who you run out of your lives can come back in different ways. And here you see the press being removed from the Roanoke Times. That's a picture that just ran on Facebook this week. It's been disassembled, taken out. So Dwayne Yancey and Lou Ann started the Cardinal News. They are trying to cover everything in Western Virginia, as Dwayne said, from Cumberland County to the Cumberland Gap. Henry Gendreau, former police beat and Virginia Tech reporter who was let go by the paper in 2021. He started the Rambler. He's had a number of scoops on his site. He's even scooped the newspaper. Both have plans to add reporters. And so as I close here, I want to say what I learned is that as much as I love the institution and the newspaper, and I did love, and I still love the Roanoke Times, and I consider it the greatest honor of my life to have worked there. And as much as I love that rambling old building with its labyrinth hallways and its crazy mezzanine that was actually between the first floor and the second floor, and my cubicle and the musty old news library with all its news clippings, as much as I loved all that, I have to say with all honesty that what I love most were my colleagues, my coworkers, who are among my best friends, and I considered them like family. They're the ones who mattered the most. They're the ones still reporting and writing the news. And whether it's for the Roanoke Times, Cardinal News, the Rambler, or whatever else they come up with. It's those people who are committed to the region, and they are committed to reporting the news and the telling of the stories of the people who live here. I won't tell you that this is the golden age of journalism, because there's so many factors that still affect us, from disconnected corporate ownership to the rise of social media and people's personal information silos that they live in. But as long as that there are people committed to reporting the news, and as long as they can make a living doing it, there's hope for local news in Roanoke, Virginia, and beyond. Thank you very much.
Ralph, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. We give a speaker honorarium, and you have chosen the Ram House. So thank you very much for that. Absolutely. Next week, we have Anna Preston with the Botetourt Music Academy, Cradle of Abundance, and that's going to be introduced by Brooke Tolley. So that should be fun and exciting. And on that note, I think we are done. Thank you all. I know we are light attendance today. We had it's almost half and half, about half Zoom and half on the room. So what was our total? 59 folks today here at Kiwanis. So y'all enjoy your week, and thank you again. We are adjourned.
And bye, kids. See you next time.